Okay, hi everyone, thank you for being here today and welcome to our panel about student experience. My name's Tegan and I'm a recent graduate from Fashion History and Theory here at Central St Martin's, and I'm also a FACE associate. Today's panel will be hosted by myself and Kiara, and I'll let Kiara introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Kiara. I'm a writer and I'm a third year student who also is on Fashion History and Theory. I'm also a FACE rep, and my project currently is working on Christopher Kane's platform zine in collaboration with FACE.
So this panel is of particular interest to myself and Kiara as we've been working as change makers for the last academic year. So within this role, we were employed to work in partnership with the programs at Central St Martin's and the course teams to co-develop and co-design curricula in line with the university's commitment to social justice. So that included anti-racism, climate justice and ethics as core aspects of the student experience.
As change makers, we would liaise with staff and talk to the student body about how the experience is going, as well as the CSM governors, and communicating the needs and opinions of the students here. At the end of our time as change makers, we put together a publication about all the amazing achievements and our manifesto as well that we created during our time. And there are copies available in the library on the first floor.
So today's session is quite filled, so we're going to quickly run through some introductions and then we're going to get started. So,
okay. Just pass the parcel. So joining us today, we have the amazing Teleica Kirkland. God, I'm so bad at speaking. Teleica is the founder and creative director of CIAD, Costume Institute of the African Diaspora. She has over 20 years experience working in fashion industry and the costume industry, and is currently a lecturer at London College of Fashion. Today, Teleica will be talking about cultural proximity and its effect on student engagement.
After Teleica's presentation, we'll be hearing from Sameerah and Ranji, who are from a student collective called Hemlines. Ranji is a South African and American writer, researcher, photographer, creative director, and is currently completing her MA in fashion communication. Sameerah is also on that course and is a German-Nigerian fashion researcher, writer, and creator, encompassing issues of social justice within the fashion industry. So we have a lot of interesting things to cover today. So we're going to start with Teleica's presentation, if you'd like to.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Just to describe myself, I am a Black woman with, I think it's green and yellow striped head wrap, if I remember rightly. And I'm wearing a white shirt, a green skirt, brown boots, and a red floral kimono top. I've come to talk to you today about a course that I run, a project that I run at LCF, called the Cross-Cultural Identities Project. And if I could have the next slide, please. The subject of this talk has developed over time from my experiences of teaching students from various ethnic diversities, cultural and class backgrounds. Within my 20+ years teaching experience, I have and continue to have the privilege of engaging with students from all over the world, all of whom come from a wealth of personal experiences. However, it has been over the past 5 years or so where the strength of my own pedagogy has been used to focus on how students' personal cultural experiences or understanding is able to be used within their academic work. Next slide, please. I lead a second year undergraduate project called the Cross-Cultural Identities, or CCI for short, which is housed within the larger second year academic unit entitled Cultural Issues in Fashion Research, CIFR, at London College of Fashion. This unit contains 8 projects, all of which focus in some way on the research or interests of the project leader, myself, or which detail the students bid for at the end of their first year. My project engages in depth with ethnic, cultural, nationalistic, class, and racialized elements of cultural understanding. How this impacts a person's knowledge, their sense of self, how they behave or move through the world, and subsequently, how they then seek to represent themselves sartorially. Next slide, please. Increasingly, and certainly with the aftermath of the George Floyd incident, there is an avenue and encouragement for students to discuss their understanding and to develop a criticality of their experiences and their positionality within academia and the fashion industry at large. However, I am also recognizing that it seems to be increasingly difficult for students to come to terms with or objectively engage with their own experiences in a way that helps them understand how Gilroy's discussions on diaspora and displacement, Hall's research on representation, or Crenshaw's exploration in intersectionality are available lenses with which they are able to analyze their personal histories. Next slide, please. To put it bluntly, these students are traumatized by being outside of their comfort zone, traumatized by feeling that people in charge of their learning, who ultimately hold the key to their progression, don't and aren't always trying to understand them or where they're coming from, both physically and mentally. Traumatized by the racism and or prejudice some of them inevitably encounter, even though we're firmly in the future right now. The list goes on. I would suggest that the underdevelopment of some students' mindsets, alongside the expectations of a postmodern life and the inability of the academy to understand their own positionality in relation to the students, perpetuates that trauma. The outcome of this, in my experience, is often a shallow engagement with subject matter that remains pertinent to their own existences and continued future within their chosen field of practice. Next slide, please. Students have often not been able to or are unwilling to see beyond their positionality because they oftentimes haven't even had the chance to understand or come to terms with that positionality and what that means for them. It is, of course, completely at the student's discretion as to whether they wish to recognize their own trauma and find productive and healthy ways to engage with it. But I have noticed, given the platform of a project like the CCI, run by someone who recognizes that trauma within herself and within them, they use that opportunity to exorcise those disturbing thoughts and discussions. I understand why this happens. This project is one of the few that is providing a curriculum for which they feel they have a cultural connection. This is a plus and one I am proud to have cultivated. But I also realize for their own satisfactory progression and for the continued success of such a project, they need to develop a strong critical analytical perspectives on the issues they wish to write about. Next slide, please. I also believe my own positionality may impact the students and their level of comfortability with being able to express concerns that they have felt unable to express before. I know that as one of the few Black female academics in my department and the only Black project and unit leader, I feel the weight of obligation at being expected to speak to these issues and find solutions, whilst also wanting to help these students reach a cohesive realization. As a Black academic, I also feel a compulsion to acknowledge these patterns amongst the hundreds of students who pass my way, as I not only know how easily it is to fall through the cracks and be ignored, but I also recognize that their experiences echo my own undergraduate experience. I aim to be the lecturer I needed for them in an effort to perhaps offer an insightful and encouraging voice within the ivory tower that can help them achieve. Next slide, please. Although I also acknowledge that this in itself may be problematic and exacerbate this issue, as racial and or demographical familiarity or cultural proximity has sometimes lent itself to shorthand within written work that I don't feel would happen if the work was being assessed by a non-Black lecturer. The parameters of professionalism, along with the divulgence of personal experiences, is something I am continually reinforcing, but I also expect the students to take responsibility for the development of their own critical distance. To be absolutely clear, I'm not saying that students shouldn't use their experiences as the basis for their research. I believe experiential evidence and anecdotal extrapolation to express a point or feeling about a particular subject can be very powerful when used productively. What I am saying is that discussions of experience and anecdotes is often where the exploration ends. And I feel that a deeper analysis of these encounters through an objective lens may help towards dealing with unexpressed trauma and developing stronger academic work. Next slide, please. So what can be done? Maybe cultural reading groups where particular topics are centered and analysed each session. Possibly, it's possible that that may help. And although many students abhor reading, I know no one likes reading, and are often dissuaded from engaging by the density of some academic texts, a textual analysis of short passages in the moment may give students the confidence to tackle these things on their own and or with each other. Maybe toolkits, which break down the readings and research to the most key points that can be expanded upon through focused discussion. This might also work and may be a way around the textual alienation issue and make the resources more easily digestible. Or perhaps cultural engagement hubs, where students get the opportunity to essentially vent their spleens and share their experiences in a safe space that then equips them with the tools in understanding how to approach and write about these situations. This last option is something I have discussed with Carol Morrison, who's the educational developer for academic enhancement at LCF, and will hopefully be made into a reality in sometime in the future. However, before any of these suggestions can be implemented, we need the institution to not only acknowledge that students from racialized and working class backgrounds are often dealing with trauma and are sometimes battling monumental anxieties just to get into the institutions in the first place, but that actual real institutional changes need to be made, not soundbite lip service about unconscious bias or equality training. Academics actually have to care. Next slide, please. No, next slide. Yeah. Okay. I say all this with full knowledge that the environment of the academy has historically been an unwelcoming place for students of these demographics. And there has been an unexpressed expectation to alter oneself in order to fit in. For a while now, it has been expressed that the institutions are implementing change and have become inviting places for everyone from every corner of the globe. And to be fair, events like this summit demonstrate that there are some moves being made in the right direction. However, there is definitely more that can be done, and that will not only empower and enrich these demographics, but that will undoubtedly have greater positive implications for achievement statistics. And so on this last slide, I just wanted to mention the organization that I run that Kiara, thank you, Kiara mentioned, Costume Institute of the African Diaspora, it's KIAD for short, and we, in the guise of trying to make these platforms available for students so that they can come and talk, we're starting, well, this is the second one of our conferences, our biennial conferences, that should have actually happened in 2020, but you know, the world. And so we're having it on the 28th of October at LCF. Everyone's invited, please do come, where we bring together academics from across the world so that they can see that there are people who are writing and researching and who are coming from the places they're coming from and who understand the things that they understand and are able to speak to these issues that I've mentioned about criticality and dress and fashion and textiles and all of these things. And so I did just want to finish with giving a short anecdote about two students who I've dealt with since they were in level 3. They were in level 3 at a different college that I worked at, and as I moved to LCF, they moved with me. And it was, one of them is from Eastern Europe, and the other one is Black trans female. And they have gone through varying, the first student from Eastern Europe is male, cishet male, And both of them have gone through varying experiences of not being supported and not being catered to and just struggling, really struggling. And because I had this relationship with them previously, then I felt very responsible, because it was my job as their tutor in FE to get them into higher education. And I had successfully managed to do that, even though the Eastern European student nearly legged it down the road, down Oxford Street, because he was petrified of going through the process. And what happened is that we had a big hall where everyone is showing their work. Lots of students from all over the country have come and they're showing their work. And he did brilliant work, but he was just too scared to show it. And so I was on one side of the room supporting another student, and I saw him dart across the room on the other side of the hall and said to the student, bear with me, pegged it down the corridor, where are you going? And he was just like, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. And it took me about an hour to calm him down and to talk him down. And I eventually got his tutor, who would have been the tutor for his course, to come and talk to him and have a look at his work privately, just the three of us. And I'm really pleased to tell you that through all that scaffolding and him coming to me over the 3 years and kind of saying, have a look at this, what do you think of this? And I wasn't his tutor at all through any of those 3 years, but I just me being there, I think, was enough for him. He successfully graduated, I think last year, and I'm so very proud of him. I can't tell you. Now, my trans student hasn't been as successful, because unfortunately she's not clear within herself where she wants to go. However, even though she's not in academia anymore, I am still supporting her and still helping and trying to send her messages of encouragement and trying to say, you know, she wants to start again. She wants to get in and do something. But I'm not anyone's mum, but I just want to let her know and let all of them know that I'm here to support you. And I do that because I didn't have that. And when I first started at undergrad, and I was the only Black student on my course for the whole 3 years, and all the 3 years before me and the 3 years after me, and I said to my head of year, I'm leaving because I'm the only Black student and no one is interested in anything that I've got to deal with. They said, no, please don't leave, please don't leave. And I realized at that moment that I was a quota and I was ticking a box. And so I needed support and I didn't get it. And I struggled through university, and I just want to be that somebody for them. And maybe that's a folly, maybe that's a pointless exercise, but I recognize the struggle. And that's where I want to just finish. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Teleica. And thank you for caring and giving nurture to all the students that have had the pleasure of being in your classroom. We're now going to pass over to Hemlines, who are going to tell us about their collective.
Hi, just to introduce myself, my name is Ranji. I'm a dark-skinned Black woman. I have 4C hair tied up in a scrunchie, and I'm wearing a white polo neck and a black skirt.
Hi, I'm Sameerah. I'm a mixed race woman, and I have braids, dark braids, and I'm wearing an all-black outfit today.
Thank you for the audio description. So just to start us off, who is Hemlines?
So Hemline was started by a group of us around May-ish. It's me, Sameerah, and our classmates, Shifra, Melanie, and Mariam, and Diamond was also one of the founding members. And basically, we're a group of women in the MA Fashion Communication course, and I guess we recognized that we had these different sort of perspectives as Black women that sort of were very different, but then converged in like very important ways, and so we decided to like sort of bring that together.
Yeah, it actually started with us having a conversation about, like, after a lecture from Harris Elliott, we had a conversation about, like, a thing he said, how important it is to invite people to our table instead of, like, going to other people's tables. So Hemline is kind of like creating our own table. And yeah, we all work in different fields, but in the end, like as Ranji mentioned, we all have the unified, like a similar experience. And in the end, it felt still important to us, even though we were all working on our different topics, but around like a similar experience, it felt important to support each other in the sense that even though we deal with these issues, we're still alone with it in the industry later, because we're still going to be one of the few only Black people in the room.
And how do you see sustainable change in the industry happening?
Well, I would say it has to do with what Teleica was talking about like, I guess, pedagogy and also decolonization, not necessarily just being a thing that people talk about superficially and using it to stall as well. I just feel, yeah, it isn't definitely an education.
I think one thing we talked about was also how we're only talking about decolonization because we're at a point where it's convenient for white institutions to do so after 2020 especially. And in the end, it starts with decolonizing our own minds apart from like, or like inclusion as well happening in our own minds, because in the end, like we're also in a position where our feelings get invalidated so much that we internalize that. And in the end, it's more about like decolonizing ourselves and making other people aware and like kind of like show them that they have to decolonize themselves as well at some point.
My question is, what advice do you have for students who do feel that they've been invalidated throughout their academic career, and how would you encourage them to keep going?
In the end, I feel like that's the most important part why we're coming together. In the end, like you're not alone. And I feel like it took the conversations happening in 2020 to actually see that, because like, for example, I'm 23 years old and coming to CSM was the first time I actually had a Black tutor in the whole part of my education. And I feel like having this conversation also with my classmates was just generally, yeah, a hint or like like even being in this room and like talking or like being part of the summit as general, like at large, is just, it shows that we're not alone in this, and to actually see that is just like a huge step. So in the end, just get into conversation with people that look like you, go through the same experience as you, and you see that your feelings are not invalidated. There's definitely room for them to be seen.
Yeah, I would say my advice would be like, it sounds really basic, but just like to back yourself, because at the end of the day, your perspective does matter and it is real. Like, I don't know, it sounds very silly to say that, but like your perspective is valid.
And what do you see for the future of Hemline? What does the future look like?
In the end, the most important part for us is staying in conversation and like being in exchange with other people, because as I've mentioned, like it's important to see that you're not alone and there's space. And in the end, we're a collectivied voice, which is sometimes easier for people instead of being a single voice, especially like as a Black woman, to like, it's often like scary to like think about that you might fall into the like route of being displayed as the angry Black woman. So like to be a unified voice in the end is the point of it, and to like stay in conversation and to like make space for ourselves as a collective.
Did you have more slides? Yeah, if you could go to the next slide. Did you want to talk on that? If you go to the next slide, maybe. Yeah. This is also important.
Yeah.
Pardon? Do you want to talk a bit about your mission statement and what it means for you guys and how you guys kind of came up with it together?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's in, I guess, the name Hemline. One of our members came up with it because she was reading Frantz Fanon and she saw this quote that basically says that we're sort of hemmed in to our identities. And yeah, so basically, I guess our mission statement is just sort of describing the context in which we came together.
Yeah, I feel like Ranji mentioned everything. In the end, like our mission is still like to be there for each other and to empower each other. And yeah, that's kind of like the most important aspect, to show people that there's more than to us than the aspect of struggle, like way more than that. So it's more about like empowerment and like make space for yourself. And then in the end, when you get that critical distance and are able to like look at the issues from like an outside perspective, but still consider your positionality, you can use that in your creative work and show people different facets of that.
Amazing, thank you so much. And I also think on the topic of conversation and opening it up, it'd be great if anyone has any questions to join in. I've got some to start us off with, just kind of a bit of conversation with the panel that we have today. So firstly, Teleica, I wondered if you could tell the audience a bit more about what cultural proximity means and how that fits into fashion education.
So my understanding of cultural proximity is basically having a certain closeness to a particular cultural understanding, right? So on the CCI, generally, we have a lot of students who are from somewhere else, okay? And but there's always a handful of Black students, always. I think they come because they know I'm there. And so what has happened in the past is that they see me, they recognize, and this is why I said in my presentation, maybe just my existence is a bit problematic in this sense, because they see me and they see a connection with me, which is great, but that also then means that they feel like I will get everything, right? I will understand everything. And so cultural proximity in that sense is a type of link to me. They see this link to me as another Black person. I will understand everything from their point of view. I won't challenge them, which I do always. I won't ask difficult questions. You know, they kind of be like, oh, well, you are like me, so you get it, you know. And the thing is that I do get it, but that doesn't mean that I don't want them to critically engage. And I think that a lot of the times they've not been pressed on that. And so when I look like them and I'm still pressing them, not that I'm being horrible, but I'm like, I get that, I totally understand that, but what about this? They don't necessarily expect that. I hope that answered the question.
I actually have a follow-up question. Sorry to grill you right now. But I wanted to ask, what would your advice be then for white educators who are dealing with difficult subject matter that they may not understand or relate to? How would you maybe advise them to, I know that's a big question for a Friday afternoon, but like, how would you maybe advise, say, a colleague who
Listen, we've all got the same Google.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know everything about Blackness. In fact, I know a fraction of a fraction, right? We've all got the same, I read as much as they read, and what has happened at the moment is that a lot of my white colleagues turn to me and ask me for the resources. You know, now because I'm an idiot, I give them the resources because I want, essentially I'm an educator, I want everyone to know the information, but we all have the same information at our fingertips. I haven't found anything else that nobody else can find, you know, and I get a bit frustrated. I'm sorry if this is coming across in my voice, but I just get a bit frustrated that the desire to do the work, or just even the attempt to do the work, is so lackadaisical, you know. Instead, that what happens that I've encountered oftentimes is the pushback of trying to learn more, you know, not taking, if there was anyone else running my class, I would expect them, as I do, I spend a lot of time learning students' names, how to pronounce a Chinese name, you know, because one part of the course talks about enforced anglicization, which is feeling like you have to change your name to an anglicized name to fit in. That doesn't just happen with Chinese students, that happens with African students as well, right? And so I talk about this. I would expect white educators to spend as much time as I spend on various courses on YouTube with various bloggers, trying to, that's all of that, right? Trying to train my mouth to do something different. I spend the time doing it. I expect everyone else to do it as well, because I expect people to care. Why else are you doing this job?
Amen.
Amen. Oh no, don't clap.
No, knowledge is infinite, and there's no point you stop learning. You actually had a very interesting slide up that I wanted to discuss with the people from Hemline. So there was one slide that said, about Black attainment rates at university. And I wanted to ask, and it's a bit of a personal question, but if at any point you actually considered dropping out of university.
I did.
Yeah, I did. I still am. No, I'm joking. But no, if at any point you kind of thought that thought process was in your mind.
For me, I think it was just never an option to drop out because we're coming from South Africa where education was a huge part of like continuing the oppression of apartheid. I think my parents have always been like very, you don't have a choice. What do you mean you're not going to finish school kind of thing. So it was never an option. I never even thought of dropping out. It was just sort of restructuring how I'm doing it, I guess.
For me, like it's a similar thing. Like I think how your education is supposed to be, like from societal point of view, is very straightforward. So like obviously you work towards that goal, and like my dad, who's Nigerian, always said to me, you have to work very, very hard. So like that just internalized from a very early age on. So I'm working very hard, and I think as I mentioned earlier, like I was mostly only the only Black student in class. Like even when it came to my undergrad and like writing my dissertation, like I never had a Black teacher, but wrote my dissertation about diversity and streetwear culture and had to like confine in like white educators who would not get the issue and make racist comments on top. So it's like difficult to like open up in that space in that sense. But I think here, like also especially like connecting with my classmates, it's definitely, it makes it easier, but still like there's, in terms of like the university, it makes it easier and more bearable, especially if you like work on topics that interest you, which like for me obviously is anti-racism, among like queer activism and feminism. But yeah, I think in the end, it's more about like still fighting for the space and like trying to find ways which make me feel comfortable and within my work.
Do you want to speak?
I did. I kind of wanted to follow up again and just kind of ask, this is like a bit of a more open question if anybody else has a comment, but about this push and this almost need to kind of always pursue Black excellence and to never be okay with Black mediocrity. And is that also another reason why Black students feel this pressure to never drop out? Because I think there's also this thing of kind of, if you fail, that's it, you represent it. If you're the only Black person in your classroom and you leave, that's it. So I think maybe there is that kind of pressure to be that person and to unfortunately have to be part of that quota and be that statistic, and you've got to be the one to get first, otherwise the whole statistic drops, you know? Like, I just wanted to ask, do you think that that push for Black excellence is as problematic as it's been described in recent kind of discourse?
It's not my question.
Oh no, you too.
Yeah, no, I absolutely do think it's problematic because it goes along with the understanding that Black people have to be superhuman, right? Not that it's superhuman to get a first, but you can't just be. You can't just relax and, you know, of course we're at university, we're here to study all of those things, but you can't just enjoy your time and go through the process. You have to be striving and pushing, and it's exhausting. It's actually exhausting and adds to the trauma that I was talking about. You know, this pressure. The reason I didn't drop out, and like I said to you, I went to my head of year in my undergrad and said, you know, F this, rah, 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 and had a big Barney with him. And the reason I didn't drop out is because I didn't want to let my mum down. You know, I'm the first one out of my family to go to university. And exactly that reason, if I suddenly don't finish, then what does that mean for everyone else who hasn't had chance to go or didn't even think about going, you know? And I feel that with the students, the suggestion is that there's two things. Either the first one is, oh, well, yeah, obviously you're going to fall out because this was never for you in the first place. Or if you're going to stay, then you've got to do the absolute best because there's this pressure to perform, you know? And actually, can we just breathe a bit? Is that okay? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, let's just chill. Let's just...
Yeah, I think the issue also with like striving for like Black excellence in a sense is the phase of education, because there's also so few like role models, and you always like strive for like the wide ideal of like what it means to have made it, in a sense. Yeah. So it's like the wide ideal of success, because there's so many like, or like unknown stories, or like stories you don't see, or like role models you don't see necessarily, which have made it like in a different way, but you never really know because it's not the dominant discourse.
So one of the conversations we had a lot as changemakers last year was about this kind of idea of belonging and having safe spaces within universities, and how without feeling a sense of student agency, then it kind of harbors your ability to succeed. And I wondered kind of if there could be like one small change moving forwards to like make university feel like a safer place, what would it be for you?
There's so much to change. There's so much.
That's why I said one small thing to start.
Well, I want to go back to the idea of everyone putting in the effort, you know, the institution and the academics and the scholars putting in the effort to actually recognize the people that they're interacting with on a daily basis, you know, not just the Black students, but all the students from working class backgrounds, from ethnic minority backgrounds, all of those things, you know, really recognize what's happening, or what has been happening for a long time anyway, is that there is this knowledge that sits in a particular place, and we're all supposed to go towards the knowledge, right? Instead of actually looking at the bank of bodies and the bank of experiences we have in front of us and going towards that knowledge and being able to validate that knowledge and make it work for the people who are looking for the education. And I think there needs to be a shift, a massive shift in understanding within the institutions and within academics to make that happen, you know.
I think in terms of like having a safe space in the university is like, if you like right now, like most of like cultural expressions from the Black community deal with like Black struggles and Black issues, and I feel like it's also a very personal one. Like obviously it's a very, very personal one. So if you open up and like want to talk about it, the most important fact is of like being heard and not invalidated. And that's just like always the thing. You're always like either afraid to be invalidated or you actually are invalidated. So I feel like it's most important to have someone, like I would have loved to have you as a teacher at some point. But like just to be heard, like someone, yeah, to have someone who listens, like, yeah, someone who listens and like actually hears what you're saying.
I do think it is very much in like the representation of the educators, because I think they sort of, it changes what people see as like the possibilities of what you can do, or like being an expert in a particular field. Because I mean, we had a story at some point, like maybe 2 years ago, where a primary school child asked like, oh, are black teachers even real teachers? And like, obviously they were asking that question from like a childlike perspective. They don't really get it. But just the fact that there was a child who felt the need to ask that question kind of shows us that it is in like the representation of like who's teaching, who's giving the knowledge.
Thank you so much. Does anyone on the floor have any questions? I don't know if there is a roaming mic, or can I pass it across?
Should we just repeat the question into the mic?
Yeah, we can do. If you want to shout your question, I can repeat it, or yeah, pass it. Is that okay? Thank you.
You could keep it running, so.
Hello, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Hi. I'm actually part of the academic teaching team here at CSM. There's so many sessions going on today. It's so hard to know which session to go to, but I knew definitely I wanted to come and see this session and learn about Hemline and what you're doing as a collective, because the student experience is the most important experience that is happening, and that's why I'm here. I've been in the industry a bit like you, Teleica, 20 years, and the beginning of my journey in academia, in education, was quite frankly horrific. And I studied at UAL, and it was almost like a precursor of what was going to happen in the industry. So that 20-year career was shrouded, and it was a battle with discrimination and prejudice, you know? And so I really kind of connected with what you said, because it's only 5 years ago that I decided to come out of the industry and go into teaching, because I also wanted to be the educator that I needed and I wanted to see when I was studying. And I'm quite surprised I don't know if there's much more academics here to listen to you. It's quite telling, really. Like, where are they? You know, we're student-centered and all the rest of it. Well, where are you? So I really appreciate what you're sharing. And I kind of want to ask, I understand the space you're creating with this collective. How can we come to your table?
I mean, we have a panel at the Let There Be exhibition towards the end of this year. But we're all sort of working on projects. We're also working on our dissertations at the same time. And yeah, there's more to come, basically.
In the end, it's also, like, as I mentioned earlier, like, it's about supporting each other. So like we're still figuring it out how to do that as we go. But in the end, like, we're gonna go into the industry and like we're gonna want to work with people. And then in the end, sometimes you have ideas which are not gonna be heard. So if you want to like work with us and like work on ideas, like you can always come to us. We can work together. We can get into conversation and just like stay in exchange. And in the end, that's the most important thing, and just like guide each other like through the way as we're going.
I think another thing for students to know as well is if you're struggling to find friends, allies, a community, it does feel very overwhelming, and you do have that kind of creeping imposter syndrome that says just drop out, you know, you'll find something else. But if you keep running away from the problem, you'll never learn how to solve it. So when I didn't feel there was a space there, I made my own space. I created a society at the university. God, I've got to learn to pronounce my words. I created a society at the university to kind of bring people together, and it's called the UAL Cult, which stands for Cultural Union of Liberation and Thriving. And it's to try and bring people together and not feel like you're all on your own. It's like, if you need to know where certain resources are or certain facilities, you know that there's someone there. And that sounds small, but it has a big impact on how some students have felt navigating this space, and it can be difficult. That was a really good question, and I'd like to be invited to your table sometime soon, hopefully. Any other questions?
I just wanted to say, first off, thank you so much for such a rich, wise, incredible conversation. There's three things that I wanted to say to all of you. I think the first thing is a great quote by Rumi. Rumi says, "Do not feel lonely. The entire universe is inside you." So all I would say to you is that you're doing incredible work, important work. Keep doing it. The second thing I wanted to say is that the question I had is that do you think, for example, I lived in the US for 10 years and they have historically black colleges. Do you think that should happen here? It doesn't mean that we're excluding other communities. It just means that we're rooting things in anti-racism, anti-ableism, and justice. And the third question I had is that do you think we actually need to not be a part of educational institutions? Do we need to actually create our own communities and cultures? So often what I see happening, particularly in South Asian communities, is people support the culture, but not the community. They care about the music, they care about the fashion, but they're not caring about the holistic community, for example, mental health and all the trauma that, you know, different, particularly the black community and particularly black disabled people go through in society. I think it's a huge issue. But overall, I just wanted to say a huge thank you. I really appreciate you. I wish you were my professor and you all of my peers at university, because this is the kind of community we all need in society. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think one of the massive things about FACE is that FACE is for everyone, and they've made that really clear from the start. I've been really welcomed interfaith community, and I've learned so much from all the different academics I've worked with, whether that's the white academics in the associate group working on projects to try and be better allies and try to have better cultural competency and engage in language more and change the way we speak and all these sort of things, or whether that's working with Black academics and Black students and really trying to understand from their lived experience, but appreciate that to talk about lived experience, and for myself as a white person to learn from that lived experience is a real privilege. And within an institution that can be quite hard. But I think it's finding these small groups, like, well, not the Face is small anymore, like Face, and then like Hemline, what they're doing is amazing. And they're finding a solution to the big kind of problem of what an institution is. You have to start smaller things to kind of tackle what's happening and challenge and constantly kind of push for the agenda that you want as a student body, because like one of our lovely guests said, like student experience is at the heart of university, and that is what should be kind of focused on.
I must say, you have the most fabulous jacket I've ever seen in this building.
I'm loving that sparkle.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the shoe, don't forget the shoes. But I will say, I mean, to answer your question, do we need these spaces, or should we create our own spaces? I don't think that we should feel the pressure to start everything new. I think it's too much energy, it's too much effort. But then I also think it's so hard to incite real change that sometimes it's like you just got to burn the building down and rebuild it all back up again. But there's like a lot of positive initiative that I've seen at this university that is keeping me here and that is making me want to. I know that in a couple of years' time, students like me will not struggle the way that I have, and like will continue to build these relationships. Even like the change makers made me realize that there are actually academics and lecturers and people in the governing body who care. Yeah, like Rathna is the most amazing person. If you ever get to talk to her, try and hold her for at least 5 minutes. It's very difficult, but she's like the nicest and most genuine person. And it's people like her who are proving to us that institutions want to change. It's just going to take some time. And hopefully by the time I'm a lecturer, I'll be ready to enter these spaces.
I wanted to speak to a couple of those questions as well. The first one, I want to take the last one first, about the engagement with culture on a kind of very surface level. It's something that Dr. Jagori Leary has called the food and festivals approach to culture, where people just, they engage with the nice bits, but they don't want to talk about the trauma of it. They don't want to get involved, right? And again, this goes back to what I was saying about caring. We have to admit. Turned it off. Sorry. Oh no, I'm back. I think we have to admit that, people don't care, and maybe it's very difficult for people to care, but we have to keep pushing, because I think that if we do, look at the space we're in now, and look at the conversation we're having now. There's no way this conversation is happening 5 years ago, just even 5 years ago, and 10 years ago, even more, it wouldn't have happened. So in 5 years, we will be having an even better conversation. There will be more people in the room, hopefully, right? And so it's about keep pushing in that thing. As for the HBCUs, and will we ever see anything like that over here? I don't think so. But also, I want to speak to the point that Kiara was making about, actually, I feel like it's letting institutions that already exist off the hook to even create those things. Like, it's almost saying that, oh, well, we're just going to leave you there in your white hallowed halls and it's okay. And, we won't bother you to change your curriculums. And I agree, kick down the door, burn down the building and be like, come on, what are you saying? Do you know what I mean? Because actually, let's just speak real. The bottom line is, you want my money. They want the students' money. So if you want the students' money, then do what the students need. Right? Simple things. It's simple economics, supply and demand and all that business. So I want there to be institutions that are inviting and engaging, but I don't want us to feel like we have to create HBCUs to kind of be able to get that, because I think the universities that exist have the capacity and they're just not doing it. So we have to keep pushing to make them do it.
Yes. Just make sure. Yeah, I was exactly in agreement with the good lady academic over there. I'm so surprised that there aren't more academic teachers here, because the student is the centre of everything. And yeah, you've all made absolutely amazing sense, and this was one of the top things that I wanted to come to today. Why wouldn't I? I'm a visiting lecturer. I'm also a member of FACE. Obviously, I'm here with Suleiman. We both lecture. Winchester School of Art make that happen for Suleiman and I. So Suleiman is online and I'm in real life, or we're both online. There's a hybrid approach, but that's not very common, as you can imagine. But the point is really, the student is at the centre of this. So I am surprised, and I hope you're right, where there will be more people in the room coming.
Let's keep everything crossed.
And really listening to, and actually no, one more point you said, which was amazing. Which is sad that it's amazing. Really, it really upsets me, but then actually you didn't say it, sorry, I beg your pardon, but you talked about decolonising ourselves. We have to decolonise ourselves, as white people particularly. And I say that in the sense that we have to do the work. There's no getting around the point here. There's a huge amount of work to do. White people have to do the work. It's on the white people. We're the problem. And I really do think that the quicker we get to that realisation, for those who haven't, then hopefully we will get more people sat in this room and actually, doing the work, listening. I've learned so many amazing things today about, a variety of different perspectives. Why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I then make the student experience much, much, much better? And I do learn the Chinese names as well. So thank you for saying that. Because, again, why wouldn't you? Sorry, anyway.
I am conscious of time. I know we have time for possibly 2 more questions. So if we can go to the one online, and then I think we have one more in the room. That's okay?
Yeah, sure. Should we go for the one online now?
Yes, please.
So we have a question from Melanie Ashley. How can we, CSM, authentically support initiatives like Hemlines?
Hi, Mel.
Give us a platform, I'd say. Invite us to your lectures. I don't know, let us talk to your students. Let them see that there's more than that. Like, if you're not able to do the work yourself, engage with your students and ask them their opinion. That in the end leads back to the question, why aren't there more educators in the room? Give us the space, listen to us. I think that would be my answer to them. Do you have anything to add?
It's gonna sound a bit sassy, but I don't know. I think there's been a sort of, it's kind of finicky. I don't know, but people have sort of been getting our name wrong. It's Hemlines singular, and I just feel like in the interest of respecting names and stuff, I do kind of take it personally sometimes. But yeah.
No, sorry, Hemline. Amazing work you guys are doing, and I'm sure you guys will now definitely have a lot of support from CSM to boost your platform and use, because this is a very, very important university, UAL, and you have that space now and people are listening, and I hope that you're going to get the support that you need to keep growing, because you know that the resources are definitely available here. If not here, then where, We had one more question, George.
Why didn't they give us a room?
Thanks so much for this hour. It was really, really useful. I guess I'll explain my context, which I think is quite interesting. I was Rafna's assistant at CSM for a while, and I've just started as a staff development officer here at CSM, 6 months in the role. Development what an interesting amorphous area that could be. It could be that food and festivals approach. It could be the pointless EDI training that people go through, and it could be a kind of tick boxing exercise in many ways. That's not why Rathner hired me in this post, and that's kind of not my vision for it, and that's why I came today. So I'd love to see more academics at the table as well, and if that's even bringing them to the Lethby Gallery and having another opportunity to bring more people into that space, if I can help in any way, that's what I'd like to do. One thing I've been struggling with recently is we have a reporting system called Tell Someone, which is our bullying and harassment reporting system here at CSM. But reporting is a really, reporting through that mechanism is quite a difficult thing for a lot of people to do. Anti-racism, you might experience it in some guise and have to go through that mechanism of writing it down and then sending it off to the university. You don't know if that's going to be a contracted complaint. You don't know where that's going to go. You don't know how that might be picked up, and that might reinforce the trauma, and you might have to relive it again. So I'm really interested and glad that you've been picking up the idea of safe spaces with Carol. I met Carol this week, actually. She is great. And I'm really interested in hearing from students and you all about how we can create more spaces like the one I guess we've had today, where we can check in on the kind of experiences that we're feeling throughout the year, but how my role is bringing more staff to these kind of conversations in future. So I guess that's not a question, but a kind of offer from me to kind of continue this conversation outside of here today.
But how is that going to be possible if it's not mandatory? Because with a lot of I'm from an educational background. I've been in education for about 25 years. What's interesting to see is from the time when I was at college to now, it's sad to know very little has changed. I really resonate with where you're coming from. Sorry, I can't remember your name. Teleica. I was the same. I wanted my students to get through, but there was no platform, even when I was a student, to talk. You could not speak. It was just empty. And at the end of the day, if you have the hierarchy that you can't even walk in the door, how are you going to go to your course director, report that your course director was discriminative towards you when that's the person that's marking your work?
Can I answer this question as honestly as I can? And I know that we're running out of time, so
Sorry.
I hope you don't mind me kind of rounding this up a little bit. But I've reported a lecturer before, and I still had to work with her after. And it wasn't to get her in trouble, it was just to try and make her aware that there was a problem. So I think it's enabling students to understand that they are supported even when they're not happy. Because sometimes you think that you have to be happy to be supported, but students struggle. It's inevitable. So I think letting students understand that if they're upset, they're allowed to speak about it, and that they're not going to be penalised for it. You'll have more honest opinions and ideas coming through. And I think maybe even maintaining anonymity sometimes is good for students, because I understand some things are, you have to say who you are. Let someone be anonymous so they don't have to feel that fear. And once they have that confidence, they'll be able to put their name on it, I think is important for students now, and even lecturers now. I think we have to round off because of the time. Do you want to round us up, Tegan?
I just want to say thank you so much to our amazing panelists. It's been a really incredible panel to be a part of. And thank you to the audience for the questions. And I hope you keep engaging in these conversations, pushing them in your classrooms, pushing them in your conversations with friends, and keeping this going, basically. So thank you so much.